We are joined today by a true legend in the business. He is a former two-time NWA Tag Team Champion, a former NWA Television Champion, and a former NWA United States Champion. Personally, one of my favorites of all time. Please welcome to the show, the Russian Nightmare, Nikita Koloff. Nikita, thank you so much for joining us, man.
Hey, Tyler, great to be with you. And as we were speaking before we did the broadcast, I'm excited. I didn't realize you were in Canada, so I'm excited. Of course, we can probably share a little bit about that as well today. But just great to be with you, comrade.
We announced you coming on our show last week, and immediately the feedback was through the roof. People are excited to hear from you, and I guess there's no better place to start than right at the beginning. How did you get involved in the crazy world of professional wrestling, Nikita?
Well, it's a great question. Hey, by the way, I know you usually do this with a partner. I understand. Unfortunately, because of a power outage, she couldn't be with us. Is it Mike? Is that
Mike,
your
that's
partner?
right. Yeah.
Hey, Mike, you'll probably listen to this or watch this. Sorry you couldn't join us, but wanted to give you a shout out. So
Love that. He's gonna.
Yes, I mean, so the short version of that is, I didn't grow up being a wrestling fan. I really, I grew up, and by the way, for those who still don't know, I didn't grow up in Russia either, but I was close to Canada. Minneapolis, Minnesota was kind of the early days, my humble beginnings, and I was in athletics, weightlifting, as people could probably tell from my physique back in the early days. I was big into weightlifting from the age of 12 and just really embraced bodybuilding magazines and was just infatuated and thought to myself, one day I want to look like one of those guys, and bought a 110-pound plastic weight set, started reading the articles, started lifting weights, and started eating right and taking care of my body at age 12. Wow. And so from there, I jumped into football, American football, and just got fascinated by that, and got a vision and a dream that one day I wanted to play professional football. And so I was on that path. In fact, I went to school not far from the Canadian border, Moorhead, Minnesota, far Moorhead area, up close to the Canadian border, is where I went to school. One of the schools. And I was on that path. I had a couple setbacks along the way, a couple fractured legs that I recovered from. And I like to say setbacks don't have to hold you back. They can set you up for a comeback.
Absolutely.
Right?
Great way to look at
it. That's what those fractures did, and to set me up for a comeback. And then some of my buddies got involved. People are probably familiar with the Road Warriors, LOD, Animal and Hawk, Legion of Doom. And I had actually recruited Animal out of Irondale High School in New Brighton, Minnesota, to play college football with me. Later on, I learned he got into professional wrestling. He turned around essentially and recruited me into professional wrestling.
Okay.
And I had a 5-minute conversation with the promoter in Charlotte, North Carolina, Jim Crockett Jr. I had no amateur wrestling background, no professional training, none, zero. The day I walked into Jim Crockett's office in Charlotte, North Carolina, and Nikita Koloff was born in the hallways of Charlotte that day.
Wow. So you just jumped right into Crockett then. You had nothing else. They just threw you right into the deep end, eh?
Threw me into the deep end, or you might say threw me into the fire. And I mean, we did hours of interviews that day. Obviously, my character, I was the nephew of the Russian Bear, Ivan Kolov, legendary Ivan, who beat Bruno Sammartino in Madison Square Garden, and who wrestled all across Canada, who, by the way, was more Russian than I was, because he was actually from Vancouver, so he was closer. Okay. He was closer to Russia than I was, right? And so that was part of the story. And so I didn't speak any English. So I just did hours of interviews with my shirt off, standing there, looking mean with the chains around my neck. And then they said, be in Dorton Arena in Raleigh, North Carolina tomorrow night. You're going to wrestle on television. So the interesting thing about that is, not only did I not have any wrestling background, I'd never been on television either. So talk about a double whammy. And the main instructions Crockett gave to Ivan was, if he trips on the ropes getting to the ring, he's done. He's history. He's out of here.
No pressure.
How hard can that be, huh? Well, if you've never climbed in a professional wrestling ring, it can be a lot harder than you realize. And so that was my focus that night was, don't trip on the ropes. Don't trip on the ropes.
You mentioned a great name, and I definitely want to talk about a little bit, and that's the great Ivan Kolov. How important do you think, and maybe strategic was it, that they paired you with such a veteran to kind of show you the ropes, and how much did you really learn working with Ivan?
Oh, goodness. Ivan and Don Kernodle, his partner at the time, they were the World Tag Team, the NWA World Tag Team Champions. They were instrumental in my success. And by that, I mean, so I walk into this opportunity with no experience, right? Like none. And after that initial introduction on television, which, by the way, was an 11-second victory for me. So fortunately, I didn't have to go long, or I probably would have been sent home packing. But what we did for the next 2 or 3 months, Tyler, is Don and Ivan and I would get to towns early. We'd get there probably 2 or 3 hours early at least. And you might call it on-the-job training. They'd bump all over the ring, teach me the mechanics of wrestling. And then Ivan, Uncle Ivan Jatoeta. Uncle Ivan, there's one for your listeners. I always do interviews now, like, where's his voice? I want to hear his voice. So there you go. There's a teaser. There's a taste. But I'd sit, or Ivan would sit in my corner, Uncle Ivan, watch my match. I'd sit in their corner, usually a tag team title match. I'd watch their match. And then every night on the drive home, then we talk about what's kind of a lost art, and that's the psychology of wrestling. Mm-hmm. So mechanics before the match, psychology after the match. It was a crash course. And fortunately for me, I adapted very well, became a real student, and of course had the success that I had.
No, absolutely. Would you be able to maybe share the best or some of the best advice that Ivan gave to you in those early days? Do you have anything that pops into your head that really stuck with you?
I guess probably the very first thing that pops in my head that probably means the most is, as one might guess, there were guys who had been in the business for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, still trying to get a break, right? And here this big guy from Minnesota waltzes into town and immediately is catapulted to stardom, to main event matches. And so, as one might guess, there might have been just a touch of jealousy among the boys. And what Ivan was instrumental in conveying to me is, don't pay any attention to them. You know, you may not have went to a training school. You may not, have cut your teeth, 3 or 4 or 5 years, 2 years, whatever, in some small territory. But obviously by your physique and your work ethic and your willingness to learn, you deserve all the success you're having. So don't let that bother you. And I really embraced that. And that was very helpful.
No, absolutely. You hear that a lot. Everyone wants their spot, and you probably came in looking like a huge threat with the physique that you had and the gimmick that you guys had. And with the gimmick too, back in that time period, kayfabe is very much still alive. What kind of lengths did you have to go to protect your gimmick? Were there any repercussions threatened towards you if the gimmick got exposed at all?
No, not on that end. Now, it was just old school psychology, old school mentality to protect the business at all costs. I mean, that was just the mindset that I was taught by Don and Ivan and certainly others. And so I took that to heart. And so it wasn't an instruction from Crockett or any promoter. It's something I took upon myself. And I felt like, if I was going to get this character over, I had to do everything I could to protect my own character in addition to protect the business. So I legally changed my name. I got a Russian workbook a cassette tape. For those who aren't old enough, you may not be old enough to know. Tyler, do you know?
I did have, because I had a Walkman back in my day. I had a Walkman. I've got the little baby face going, but I'm 36, so I got the Walkman going. I grew up on the
all right.
I missed out on the 8-tracks. I missed out on the 8-tracks, but I got.
You missed out on the VCR, the video, the
VCR. That's right.
And yeah, you're right. You do not look 36. So I put a few Russian words together. Dядя. Dядя is uncle in Russian, right? Пожалуйста. That means please, right? До свидания, right? Goodbye. Спокойной ночи. Good night. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's counting to 10 in Russian, right? So I put a few things together that when I started learning English, I would really sound like I was from Russia, and people would buy into it, which they did. And so I just took that upon myself. I didn't talk like this anywhere in public at all, period, at all.
So pretty early on in your career as well, you made a couple trips over to Puerto Rico. Is that correct?
Yeah, Puerto Rico is crazy. As a heel, as a bad guy, and after I got two at least a couple trips, and I think after the last one, I was like, if I never come back here again as a wrestler, I'm okay with that. I mean, we were escorted into arenas. No kidding, can't make this stuff up. Armed guards with AK-47s to get us in the stadium, get us to the arena safely, hiding us in work vans. Kids would sell bags of rocks outside the arena to pellet us with. I was in an arena one time, and I'm walking to the ring, and all of a sudden, man, I felt something on the back of my arm, and I'm like, what was that? And I look at it, I had blood on my hand. I looked down, it was a spark plug.
No way.
Somebody thrown a spark plug and caught me in the back of the arm. Fortunately, not in the head.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was pretty rough over there as a bad guy.
No kidding. So the stories are all true then that you hear all over the place. If you're a bad guy, stay away from Puerto Rico.
Yeah. Only good guy matches. Only baby. No. Yeah.
So after that, after you're running, you're rolling with Ivan for a little bit. You guys add Barry Darso to the team as well, another Minnesota boy, correct?
We did. A high school teammate. We both played football together in high school. He was a year behind me. In fact, for those who still don't know, so he was a year behind me. A year ahead of me was Kurt Hennig, Mr. Perfect, Ravishing Rick Rude.
Wow.
And in my year was John Nord the Berserker, Nord the Barbarian. All 5 of us one year were on the same high school football team. But behind us, we brought him in as Crusher Khrushchev.
So what was it like working with Barry? Was he pretty new to the business? Were you ahead of him, or was he a couple years ahead of you getting into the business?
He was like the Road Warriors. I think went to the same camp as I'm almost positive he went to the same camp as the Road Warriors. So he was a year or two ahead of me. In fact, he was, I don't know where all he went. I do know when he came to us, he had been in the Mid-South and partnering with Nikolai Volkov. So he was already kind of familiar with the Russian character, but down there, he was really an American turncoat, kind of like Don Kernodle was with Ivan Kolov. Mm-hmm. We brought him in. We didn't try to project him as a Russian guy. Our idea was to project him as an American turncoat again, but christen him with a Russian name, hence Crusher Khrushchev.
Well, and it worked too. You guys were getting big heat everywhere you went. And then right around this time too is you and Uncle Ivan defeated Dusty Rhodes and Manny Fernandez for the World Tag Team Championships, correct?
We did, and I just thought that, part of your question was did we about death threats and stuff, and in that Cold War era, people loved to hate me. At one point, I was voted the most hated guy in professional wrestling at one point, and Crockett's office actually did get literal death threats, and 6 different times I had fans come over the barricade, come after me, try to come after me. They succeeded the very first time, the very first ever Great American Bash against Ric Flair. Watch the video. You'll see a fan come in the ring and get me. And then the cops figure it out. They come rolling in, get him, and the match continues. But yeah, we defeat Dusty and Manny, and of course that just set the tone for what would happen the rest of my career.
What was it like being in the ring with Dusty Rhodes during that time period? Because arguably he was the most popular, if not one of the most popular guys in the entire business. And you know, that the crowd reaction during that time period is magical. I look back on it very fondly. How is it being in there with Dusty during that time period?
Well, you used a good word, magical. I mean, he had a certain charisma about him. You know, obviously he wasn't, you know, someone in the best shape of his life per se, but it didn't matter. People just identified, I think, with him as a, you know, as he said, an everyday, you know, son of a plumber, you know, baby, yeah, from Austin, Texas, if you will, yeah. Everybody likes to imitate.
That's good, Dusty.
I appreciate it. Thank you. But it was fun. He came in and we did an angle, an arm wrestling thing, you know, did an angle together. And obviously later, you know, we teamed up to become the Superpowers. And that's when we really became much closer, because he and I a lot of times traveled exclusively together in his convertible red Mercedes-Benz to towns, and just developed a real love for him. But yeah, he was, as far as I'm concerned, a genius contributor to the wrestling world.
Absolutely, and you're seeing the legacy living on now with Dustin and Cody as well. Cody's doing some great things with AEW. You see a lot of similarities there between those two.
Yep. Yes, absolutely. Kudos to Cody, and Dustin's still hanging in there.
Yeah, he's looking good in there too.
He does. I mean, he and I had matches together. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. So kudos to him too.
Well, some other great matches that you had around this time period too. You had some matches that hold the test of time to this day. I'm a huge fan of tag team wrestling. I think it's when done correctly, I think there's no better and exciting type of match. And when you guys were in there with the Rock and Roll Express, you know, you got Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson. The crowd loved them. Ricky is legendary for his selling. How fun was that to be in there and have that crowd heat with those guys?
Yeah, again, a couple guys with incredible experience that I learned a lot from, and you might say the ultimate underdogs.
Mm.
The ultimate underdogs. Nobody thought they had a hope or a prayer to defeat the Mad Russians, you know, but history would prove itself different, right? They in fact did defeat the Russians and really I feel put them on the map, raised the bar, took them to a whole nother level of success, onto that stardom and the fanfare that they have with everyone, as you said, just loving them, and so yeah, a lot of fun, a lot of great memories, and learned a lot from both Robert and Ricky.
Absolutely. And then you went from one extreme to another, because now the next thing you know, you guys are in there having these brutal wars with the Road Warriors. How as a performer was it to adapt from, you know, these fast-paced matches with the Rock and Roll Express to these huge, crazy battles with the Road Warriors? You know, as someone who is so new in the business, how are you adapting with all that?
Great question. And you know, anyone at the professional level, you know, who wants to excel in that has to be able to do that. And so again, fortunately, I was a student, you know, from day one. And so again, just becoming a student of that industry, learning. So I just learned how to do that. And again, having Ivan by my side and Don and others, developing that psychology, knowing how to work different styles with different guys was critical and important. I mean, I had some matches, I kind of forget these, with as far as the Mid-Atlantic goes anyway, against the very legendary guys. Johnny Weaver was legendary in the Mid-Atlantic sleeper hold. Rufus R. Freight Train Jones.
Okay.
Dory Funk Jr., world champion, right?
Mm.
I had matches against Dory Funk Jr., Black Jack Mulligan. I mean, I had matches against these guys, Wahoo McDaniel, and every one of them was gracious enough to not only make me look good and willing to work with me, but to put me over and build me into this, you know, this machine that again went on to have the success I had. So I feel very fortunate to have had the career I had.
Mm-hmm. You know, and a name that you mentioned a couple of times, and we were just talking about the Road Warriors here. I know that you mentioned Animal, and you were good friends with Animal, and unfortunately we lost him last year. Can you share any stories about your time working with Animal, or even on a personal level, just your friendship with Animal and how important he was to you?
I mean, back in the day, back in our college days, I mean, we were in a sense inseparable. You know, I fell in love with his family. His mom and dad, especially his mom, kind of fell in love with me. For whatever reason, you know, he had two other brothers, of course, Mark and Johnny, and who eventually got into wrestling as well. But early in those early college days, I mean, I spent Christmas over there. There was one year they all got mad because Lorna, his mom, had more presents under the Christmas tree for me than for her own sons. I think she felt sorry for me because I came from a broken home with no dad, but she just embraced me. And so I just really fell in love with the family and spent a lot of time over there. And we were essentially inseparable, him and I. And through those college days, fast forward to the wrestling days, and you know, we maintained a great friendship throughout the wrestling. In fact, his mom and dad eventually moved to Tampa, Florida, actually Safety Harbor. There were specific times I would take 3 or 4 days off, fly to Tampa, and just chill, just Lorna and I. You know, his dad was working full time, and he'd come home at night for supper. We'd all have supper together. I'd float around the pool, just get some R&R get a mental break. But that's how close I was to the family as well. I was at his funeral. It was great. I'm glad I went. I hadn't seen James or Joey or Jessica. I hadn't seen the children in a long, long time, nor had I seen Mark or Johnny in a long time. So it was great to see all of them and just to be there to honor his passing. And so, yeah, just a lot of really great memories there.
Well, that's great. And I know they're going to come up again as we continue to talk because they were such a huge part of your career as well. And then another huge moment in your career, if I could kind of segue over, you mentioned a little bit earlier, but the Great American Bash 85, you and Ric Flair, how much pressure was that on you as a singles competitor now, getting thrown into a world title program, coming off that amazing angle where you laid out Dave Crockett with the shickle there?
It was, I mean, in the moment, I mean, certainly you feel the pressure, the butterflies are there, and you know, because keep in mind, I'm only 13 months I'm still as green under the gills as you can get. It's 13 months to the business. And first ever Great American Bash, main event, Nature Boy Ric Flair, legendary, 25, 30, 35,000, however many were there. He flies in on the helicopter. I mean, yeah, for me to say I wasn't nervous would be a lie. Fortunately, I had the Nature Boy in the ring who I always say could make a broomstick look good because he made the Russian Nightmare look good. So grateful and thank match. And then the ensuing program, as you mentioned, night after night after night, sometimes for 60 minutes or 50 or 45 or minutes working with him every single night. Man, I learned so much from Rick, and so thankful and grateful for the privilege and the honor to work with him.
No, that's crazy that you mentioned you're only 13 months into the business at that time. You know, you hear a lot of people, they always talk about Kurt Angle and how quickly he picked up the business and, his first year in the main company. But I would put that up against your
Bill Goldberg.
Yeah, you know what? But I would put you up there with all those guys, man. You're in main event programs with the top heel. You're the top heel in the company pretty much at the time. I think people are sleeping on just how quickly you picked all this up, Nikita. I really do.
You know what, Tyler? I'll tell you why I think that is. I think you have a very valid point, and I don't make a big deal out of it, but I tell you why I think that is. By the time Goldberg, Angle, and these other guys hit the scene, And I'd have to do my history here, but internet's starting to hit the scene, right? I mean, in the 80s, people will tell you, fans will tell you, you will probably say, really wrestling magazines was pretty much your only form of communication if you didn't live in a territory, for the most part.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how you got out there.
Right. So once those guys hit the scene and communication, internet, and things start to expand and grow, and now there's more awareness of that, right? If people went back and looked at the track record of my success, starting with match 1, 11 seconds. And at the time, from what I understand, it was the quickest match on television in wrestling history here, I guess.
Yeah.
Right? Don't quote me on that, folks, but I believe that's what's
it's going to be the headlines all over now.
I know. Nikita, we fact checked that. You're a liar, right? Russian collusion. I'm just saying. But when you accelerate the matches I had, I mean, I was doing handicap matches numerous times a month, me beating, I mean, I'm talking 2 guys in the same time, same match, right? That night, like in the ring, like sickling one, in comes the other, sickling him, pinning them both, night after night after night, short matches. I'm the world tag team champ quickly. I'm the world 6-man champ quickly. 13 months of wrestling Flair. And to your point, if they had tracked that, they'd probably find that, yes, I was either right up there or probably set the tone or maybe even the idea for them to do that with a Goldberg angle or
There's
whatever.
Definitely a blueprint there for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
And, you mentioned the internet and stuff like that. And to me, I think it kind of hinders a little bit. And you had that magic era, and I'm going to use that word again because there's nothing that you watch on TV today that compares to the crowd reaction that you guys got back in the day. Every move, anytime Dusty threw an elbow or you hit Arn with a clothesline, the crowd was right there with everything. It kind of seems like the crowd today is a little bit more interested in putting themselves over than really investing and believing in what you guys were doing. So I take that trade-off, man. I think you guys had the best era of professional wrestling, bar none.
Well, a couple thoughts to that. One, it's not a clothesline, Tyler. It's a sickle.
Sorry, it's a sickle. Pardon me. I don't want to take a sickle through the screen here.
I am. It's a sickle, but and you said magical moment. Many of the fans, because I still go out, I do autograph signings. In 2017, I did a 21-day, 21-city tour from British Columbia across 4 provinces. Met all kinds of wonderful Canadian fans that I had never met before and or never knew there was Nikita Koloff fans that many in Canada, right? Oh, yeah. And to this day, they call it the golden era. The golden era of professional wrestling. Here's my insight for whatever it's worth. Here's why I believe you see the difference. In those days, there was, we'll call it a predetermined outcome, okay? But the wrestlers in the ring had total creative control in the ring. So from opening bell till the predetermined outcome, we the wrestlers, for the most part, and many times without even communicating in a dressing room, a lot of times we're on separate ends of the building, went out and told a story that drew the fan into the story spontaneously and what I would call improv. And so there was a real sense of realism there, right? Mm-hmm. We were protecting the business. We're at all cost, right? People might have had in their mind, it might not all be real, but they still couldn't really prove it, right? So they're still drawn into the story. I mean, when I was wrestling Flair for an hour, literally a 60-minute draw, a Broadway, I maybe knew the last 5 minutes, and the rest of that 55 minutes was improv. It was spontaneous, and we were listening to the fan, but the fan, kind of to your point, wasn't dictating to us what to do.
Mm-hmm.
We were dictating what we wanted you to do as the fan. And so when you go back and watch old videos, you're correct. You'll see the fan reaction response completely different from today's fan, and taking nothing away from it. But keep in mind, the difference now is there are writers who have creative control, and taking nothing away from the wrestlers, from the athletes, but they essentially don't have the liberty to go out and change something, improvise in the ring.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you're watching it, it's just a story unfolding when they already know the whole story. When as a fan in those days, you didn't know the story and really weren't sure what the outcome was going to be. Does that make sense?
That's a great point. That's a great point. You got more freedom to feed off that reaction with less. There's no repercussions for you going out there and trying something different. And I'm sure that you know, from what you read on the internet, and I'll use that because, you know, I don't have any insight, obviously, but you hear that there's a lot of people walking on pins and needles back there, not wanting to make the wrong move and go off script out there.
Right, because it could cost you your job, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, one thing I loved when Billy Corgan was, you know, before all this crazy stuff hit in 2020, when Billy Corgan was implementing the NWA Power,
mm-hmm.
I went down and did a show for him, brought a couple guys with me. You know, I was christened with the Koloff name from Uncle Ivan. I was very, very thankful for that. And we've been weaving together a little story of our own to christen a couple other guys, Alexander and Neil, as Koloff Dynasty, christening them with the Koloff name to carry on the legacy. And I brought them down to Atlanta. Well, I was introducing, I think they were introducing the World TV title, which I had, right, for a long time. And I didn't have one conversation with Corrigan or any of the rest of them about what to say when I went out for my interview.
Wow.
Nor did I back in the day. They just said, hey, you got an interview with so-and-so, you know, you got 2 minutes, whatever. They didn't give me a time. They just said, hey, you're on in 2 minutes, I think is what they said for your interview. And you know what? I just went out, man, talked to the fans, talked to him, said a little bit about my team or whatever. But like the old days, it took me back to those days, because so your listeners and viewers understand, I was never handed a script for an interview, ever.
Mm-hmm.
Ever. That was, again, 100% improv. When you watch Dusty Rhodes, you know, who said, my belly's a little bigger than it should be, my hand is a little smaller than it should be, but the dream, if I'm Austin, Texas, gonna take you down, baby, yeah. Right? That's spontaneous.
Yeah, and you feel that too. You feel that. You get some weird flashbacks walking onto that set when you did the tapings with the NWA there.
I did, dude. Now listen, it wasn't the original studio was 4 blocks down.
Oh, really? Wow.
Oh yeah, 4 blocks. But driving on Techwood Drive, I'm like, oh my gosh, this drive is so familiar. And I turned on 14th instead of 10th in Techwood. But when I had to take my own photo ops when I walked in, because I got there early, and I'm like, and it's a bigger studio and the whole deal, but nevertheless, it was set up kind of like the old day, and I was like, man, I'm digging this. This is awesome. It just brought me right back, Tyler. And then to come out and the fans respond the way they did with the love they showed me when I came out, just brought me right back.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm really glad you got to experience that. And you know, as an old school NWA fan, it was great to see you out on there as well. You know, you mentioned that you did all these tours and you got to interact with the fans recently, a couple of years ago. I'm sure that the number one question that you probably get asked all the time is about Magnum TA. And I'm not going to be any different, because I can't talk to you and not ask you about Magnum TA. Is that the biggest feud of your career, do you think? Is that kind of what people you think remember you the most by? Or
it is by far the number one the conversations I have with the fans, the number one is the best of 7 against Magnum. By far. Still friends to this day. He and I talk very frequently. He lives in Charlotte, not far from me. We will occasionally do an autograph signing together. because of that U.S. belt and the best of 7. He actually has a authentic replica of it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and just incredible. Yeah, phenomenal memories. I mean, similar work styles, both in agreement together that our goal when a fan left the ring. In fact, I literally had fans say this. They go, they have since told me this. Like, I was there that night when you won, the 3rd match, or he won the 6th match, or whatever, right? And they're like, man, we walked out of the arena that night going, I don't know about those other matches. That match with Nikita was real.
That's the ultimate compliment.
That was our
right?
goal. That was our goal, him and I.
And you guys had such a great angle to set it up. You did that amazing contract signing with his mother there, and she looked like she was terrified during the whole thing. I just rewatched it last night before we started talking.
You know why?
No, is that?
She looked terrified?
Yeah.
You don't know why, right?
No, I have no idea.
So she watched her son wrestle in high school and college and thought professional wrestling was no different. He never smartened her up.
Oh, no.
So we're at the signing, and he comes over the table, and Ivan and I are stomping, the snot out of him. So again, when you see her reaction, that's that's in real time.
Oh, so she thinks you guys are really laying him out.
Absolutely. 100%. He never smartened her up. He never told her what was going to happen.
No way.
So mom, freaking out, her little boy's getting the snot stomped.
Oh, well, you know what? It added to the angle for sure, because that's the one thing I took away from that after, you guys cut your awesome promos on each other. Is I was like, holy crap, like Magnum's mom's working real good here. It was a shoot. Unbelievable.
Yeah, not a work on her part. It was a shoot. She's like, oh, my
son. And, so you're in there with Magnum. You guys are tearing the house down. You end up taking the best of 7, and you got to get in there and you unified the title with Wahoo McDaniel too. How has it been in there with Wahoo? Because you hear he's a hard hitter and one of the toughest guys in the business.
I want to tell you what. I mean, if he doesn't like you, yeah, look out. I mean, again, I feel a great camaraderie, a great relationship with Wahoo. And I feel very, very honored, honestly, very humbled that a man of that stature was willing to put me over in the middle of the ring and drop that title belt to me. But all that to say what you want, but if you took a chop from Wahoo, you were going to sell it. There was no choice in the matter. You were going to sell a Wahoo McDaniel chop, whether you like it or not, with his handprint on your chest.
No kidding, yeah. So, unfortunately, I'm going to take a little bit of a downward turn here. You're getting ready to start your big program with Ronnie Garvin, and a big tragedy strikes with Magnum getting in his car crash. Where were you when you heard about the car crash? What were your initial reactions, and just kind of how was everybody backstage feeling about that? Because Magnum, he seemed like he was probably really well liked with the boys. He was getting poised for the world title run. It's one of the most unfortunate stories, I think, in the history of professional wrestling.
It is. I mean, things happen, right? There's things happen in life that, only God knows the real reason for it and or his purpose behind it in a sense, until it's revealed to us. Interesting story, because I was not here when it happened. I was on a 2-week tour to Japan.
Okay.
I was over there wrestling Jumbo Tsuruta and Ricky Choshu and Giant Baba and all those guys. And I remember, because I flew back and again, unlike today, I mean, we worked our tail off in those days with not a whole lot of nights off, which is why I specifically took some nights off. Because, I mean, in 1986, in fact, that's the year he had his injury, I had 454 matches in that one year.
Wow. Holy
so, do the math on that, folks. A day. And so we were in Philadelphia. Dusty and Jimmy called me into a private dressing room and said, hey, we don't know if you heard. And then they told me. And I'm not making this up. When they told me, I'm like, wrestling's a work, right? I'm like, yeah, whatever. Yeah. No, using a car wreck. I mean, yeah, great angle. oh wow, who's working that angle with him, you know? And it took him like a few minutes to really kind of convince me that no, this is like we're not ribbing here. That like this is on the square, like for real. And then I was kind of like, oh my gosh, like wow, you know, broke neck, you know, probably paralyzed the rest of his life, you know, lifted out of a bed, shaved, bathed, fed, you know, whole deal. It's like, wow. So that had to sink in, settle in for a moment, and it gave me a few minutes to process that. And then they're like, well, you know, that leaves a void. That leaves, you know, 3 weeks from now, I got this big cage match in Charlotte against the Four Horsemen, and Dusty needs a partner. And we have an idea. I'm like, okay. And that's where they shared the idea of the Russian Nightmare becoming a good guy. And I'm like, because I know how the fans were. I mean, they love to hate me, Tyler. I mean, right? I mean, the whole deal, right? Coming at the ring after me. And I'm like, so they laid it out for me. And like, we're not gonna tell anybody. If you decide to do this angle doesn't leave this room. I'm like, okay. Well, it takes some time. You don't have to give us an answer right now, but we need to know, you know, do you want this opportunity, basically? And you know, I don't know how long I pondered it that night or whatever, but I thought, you know, man, Jim Crockett, whose family has 50 plus years experience in pro wrestling, right, promoting, legendary Dusty Rhodes, if they have a hunch this could work, then gosh, why not, you know? And in fact, later on, Dusty was asked, I was on another interview, somebody had shared with me, they used to travel with Dusty in WWF, WWE, and they asked him one time, Dusty, were you for real, like for real, no, or for certain that angle was going to work? He goes, no, we didn't. We did not know how the fans are going to receive it. So I said yes. I went on to work heel every night the next 3 nights leading up, the next 3 weeks leading up to that night. And of course, the rest is history as people who followed it.
Yeah, you guys must have been just thrilled with the reaction in the Cajun when you laid out Ole and JJ. The place went absolutely insane. The roof came off the building, exactly, right? And again, I'm going to go back to that word, magical, emotional. And I don't think that you can find a more emotional night in maybe of all time than that night at the Crockett Cup when Magnum came out. Is there any way you can even try to put into words just what the vibes were when he made his entrance and you guys were embracing in the entranceway? Because that's real, you know what I mean? You can't make that up. That is
you can't. You can't manufacture that. Say what you want about wrestling, everything else, but no, that was a surreal moment that night. I mean, there were, even now thinking about it, get a little choked up. I know between. Maybe between Dusty and myself and Terry and many of the fans in the arena. I mean, there may have been a dry eye I don't know. There probably was, maybe whatever, but I can say between the three of us, there was not. Very special moment and very, very memorable moment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was a beautiful moment, and you know, unfortunately, it happened to Magnum, and what could have been with him on, you know, it's always going to be the big what ifs in the business. And here you are, you're kind of, you know, not taking Magnum's place, but you've been inserted into that main event role now. You're a babyface. You're rolling with Flair again. Was there any talk about maybe putting the title on you at that point?
Not at that point. And I don't even know, honestly, looking back, that would have won. There in those days, there was so much pressure on whoever had that belt. Tons of pressure. People don't realize traveling. I mean, pressure from travel schedule. In those days, you had to travel to the Mid-South. You had to travel to Portland, Oregon, and defend the title. You had to travel to St. Louis. You had to travel to Japan. I mean, there was a heavy burden to bear with that title. And I still don't even, I don't know that I, you know, would have been able to have it at that point in time. I did, for the record, 2 times. Now, well, fast forward a little bit, and we can cover in between whatever you want. But when it was offered to me, because it was 2 occasions, I'm probably one of the only guys that said no.
Really?
Like, turned it down. It was after the death of my wife, Mandy, and the magazines covered that extensively, did a great job. And it was not long after her passing that Rick called me, invited me down to his house in Charlotte. We had lunch on his poolside. He said, they want you back. And he had the book at the time. He was the booker, and said, come back, I'll put the belt on. It's yours. And I just said, Rick, I'm honored, but, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
He's like, okay. And I said, and they called me, maybe a week, 2, 3 later, whatever the timeline was there, down again, offered it again. And I said, Rick, thank you, but no, thank you. And so, that's like for real story. So.
Oh, that's incredible. And that just goes to show that the drawing power that you had, because at that time you've been away from the business for a couple of years, and I think you could have carried it back on and not even missed a beat as the champion. And going back to Magnum just a little bit as well, if the rumors are true that he was set to take the belt from Flair, there's a great angle built in right with you guys waiting there as well, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's no telling. I mean, we most likely would have worked. We could have. In fact, the Russian Nightmare may never have become a babyface. Let's just start with that. Ivan was a heel most of his career, but there was so many built-in angle. I mean, flag versus flag. The world title belt. I mean, chain matches. I mean, just go down the list of programs that Terry and I could have run with him as champion.
Well, you mentioned different types of matches here, and I'm going to pull this out. This is I'm a little bit of a collector, and this is a original program from the very first ever War Games match. This is my personal favorite match of all time. Can you share some memories about just your reactions when you heard about the match and just how it's holding up even today's standard? You're still seeing it going strong.
I mean, again, Dusty's creative genius, right? Like the American Bash, like the Best of 7. Those are all Dusty creations as far as I'm concerned. And nobody really knew what to expect the very first one. I mean, they were all fun, but the very first one was the most special because nobody really knew what to expect. And I guess the fondest memory is just how you could feel the electricity in the building that night. I mean, it was electric. And the pivot back and forth, I never figured out how the heels won every coin toss. I never figured that part out.
You got lucky guesses of many years in a row, eh?
The lucky flip of the coin. Oh my gosh, you guys won again. So always having the 2-on-1, 3-on-2, 4-on-3 advantage. That just led to the anticipation by the fans, building up to all 5 in the ring, leading it up to the outcome, right? But man, those were so much fun. Just being a part of those and interjecting who's going in at number 4, who's going in at number 7 tonight, who's going, whatever. It was just so many great memories. And I'll take let's see, who was the quote? I don't know who the quote was from originally, but it said that often imitated, never duplicated. So even though they can do, more War Games and all this, we even did, right? The Sting Squadron.
Yeah. I was just going to bring that up as well. You did a second one there.
Sting Squadron and a part of that. Great to be a part of that with Steamboat and Stinger and some of the others. And those were fun. Those were fun. Different group of guys, but there was nothing like there just seems to be nothing like the original, no matter what it is. But
if I had a time machine, Nikita, I could pick any match to watch in person live, it would be that War Games match. Not even a question in my mind about it.
I hear you. A lot of fans tell me the same thing.
So I know you're a busy man here. I just got a couple quick more questions here. I want to just kind of bang through really quick. I appreciate all the time you're giving us. I could sit here and listen to you for hours, so I'm gonna try to bang through a couple here quickly.
We'll just have to do another one, Tyler.
Oh, absolutely, man. Open invitation anytime. Maybe we'll even let Mike join on the next one too.
There you go. Sorry, Mike.
Sorry, buddy. You're missing out on a good one today, my friend. You came back to the company about 91 and you were working with the name you just mentioned, Sting. How fun was it coming back? What led to you coming back in 91? Did you, and sorry, did you have any conversations about maybe going to New York, to the WWF at all? Did you ever have any conversation going there?
Never any conversations left unless they left a voicemail on the old school recording machine, a tape recording machine that I never got. But also no real interest. I was to this day, forever loyal to the NWA. Jim Crockett gave me my break, and I probably could have went there and made 10 times, 100 times the money. But I wasn't motivated by money. It's fun to kind of think back, like you're talking about the what ifs, and had Hogan and I met in WrestleMania, who knows what could happen with that?
You seem like a guy Vince would love, right?
Yeah, Sean and some of the other guys that would have been The Rock and some of the guys who would have been fun to work with, Macho Man and whatnot, but it wasn't meant to be. And it was just at a time when I was ready to come back after the passing of Mandy, and we did the deal with Luger first, hitting him over the head with the belt, and then that. Because of how strong the Magnum angle was and the cover shot of I Cry a Tear for Magnum TA and all that, 50 of the fans still cheered me, even though Luger is one of the hottest baby faces. That's why we went on to do the angle with Sting where Luger ducks and I hit Sting. They're like, well, it's the hottest baby face, so surely that'll get you over as a heel. That was 75-25.
Yeah.
And then I thought, I want to end my career as a babyface. Took some time off again, came back, made the appeal to Sting. I'm just condensing this down for you, but and then finished the career as a teammate of Stinger and some other guys, and just finished my career and walked away under my own terms. It wasn't career ending, injury ending, or anything like that. It was under my own terms that I had determined the day I got into wrestling, walking away on top of the business.
Yeah, no, and that's not a lot of people can say that, and I'm really happy that you were able to do that. And just with speaking to you today, you can just see all the proud memories that you have, and rightfully so, of the business. And not a lot of people can say that leaving the industry.
Well, and they do say, I was in an interview the other day and said you're one of the maybe the only guy, one of the few guys I know that retired and stayed retired. You didn't retire 9 times, and but that again, that was. I'm you might appreciate this. I always appreciated Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah.
And he walked away. And Barry Sanders with the Detroit Lions. I've been kind of coined the Barry Sanders of pro wrestling, He walked away in the prime of his career, right? I did too. I was 33 when I walked away. But it was part of my goal, part of what I determined early on. And so no regrets looking back, no regrets not working for New York for Vince or anything else or anyone else. Thrilled about the career I had. And I still stay engaged, obviously, through social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Legends autograph signings, card shows. So I still stay engaged with the fans, taking, Koloff Dynasty out to some independent shows, standing in their corner and enjoying that. And so still engaged with wrestling, love the fans. And yeah, it's been an incredible ride.
Yeah, you said it great. You walked away on your terms, and you were you didn't hear from Nikita in a long time. And I think the wrestling world was kind of surprised when we saw you pop up in very shortly in NWA TNA as well. How did that come to be? And how fun was it getting to work with Dusty one more time?
Well, it was that's an interesting story. I was actually living in Nashville at the time when Jarrett launched TNA. And so they reached out, and it was kind of interesting because I wasn't interested in getting back in the ring. Jeff Jarrett kept prompting me, come on, you do 6-mans and stand on the ring apron. I'm like, all right, Jeff, are you kidding me? The Russian Nightmare look like an idiot. Stand on the ring apron and not getting in the ring. If I'm going to be in a 6-man around the ring apron, I'm going to want to get in. I just said, thank you, but no thank you. So it was my way of kind of giving back to the wrestling world, trying to help TNA get off to trying to kickstart their company, come in, do some appearances, do a little angle with Dusty, reunite the superpowers, have some fun with that. And most importantly, though, little known fact is I used to do a Bible study for all of the guys every Wednesday night before their pay-per-view, live pay-per-view. And AJ Styles and Terry Taylor and some of the other guys attended those Bible studies numerous times prior to the show going live that night. That's where my heart at that time was. As I'm sure you're probably aware, 11 months after I left wrestling, I didn't plan this, just like I didn't plan wrestling. I found myself in a church at an altar, surrendering my life to Jesus. And little did I know, all these years later, I'd be traveling to 30 different countries all over the world, churches. And Lex Luger and I, you see my shirt here, Man Camp, right? Well, that's a camp that Lex Luger and I co-facilitate in Georgia. Small, people, men, you can go check it out at mancamp.info. Go check it out there, mancamp.info. And so I was led on a completely different path while still maintaining my love for the wrestling fan and my connection with the wrestling fan, now being a full-time evangelist / minister and really reaching out to men around the world. So kind of that's kind of where I'm at now, Tyler.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I was going to ask, what's my final thing to you there? Just if you wanted to plug anything, what you did with Man Camp there, any of your social media, what you were doing today, but you just nailed that one. So
yeah. Well, and let me just tag a couple of things. So, a couple books that fans can get. My life story called Nikita, A Tale of the Ring and Redemption. So that might be something of interest. And you just message me directly on that. You can do that right through mancamp.info or koloff.org. O-R-G, koloff.org, koloff.org. Wrestling with Success, one's motivational, one's inspirational. And then I want to encourage, and I appreciate the opportunity to plug this stuff. I want to encourage people. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Nikita Koloff with the number 1 behind it. If you look for me on Facebook, look for me. There's a lot of imposters out there, but look for me standing in a river with the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, and another friend of ours. That river is the Jordan River in Israel. We were taking turns back each other in the Jordan. That's the real me on Facebook. And then just a few months ago, I launched my own podcast, but also a radio show that airs in the Carolinas and Virginia called It's Time to Man Up. In fact, just recently, I did a 2-part interview with Sting.
Wow.
About his wrestling career, including AEW. So, guys, go check out, go download, subscribe to It's Time to Man Up should be on all the podcast platforms. And I just can't thank you enough for having me on today.
Nikita, the pleasure was all mine. Like I said at the beginning of this, you're one of my favorites of all time. We are honored to have you join the show. Nothing but great success to you in the future, my friend.
Thank you. And to all the fans out there, hope to get to see you maybe one day, cross paths, come to your town, sign an autograph, take a picture, and just God bless you. God bless you, Tyler. Thank you.
Thank you.